What's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Today is the 24th. So just wanted to give a little bit of update. So last week I did not actually record, and I'm going to get into why this episode. This episode is titled "A Thousand Problems Are a Gift Until You Can't Solve One." And the reason why that one problem is around your health. Health is the gatekeeper to every single problem that you have in your life. When you lose it, everything else disappears. You go from having 1,000 problems, which are a blessing actually, to just one, which is get yourself healthy. Get yourself back to having the right energy, the right vibrancy of life. But until you get that one problem solved, you can't handle really much of anything else because you're just not giving yourself the optimal energy and the optimal how you need to show up and really delivering, your gift day in and day out. So the reason why this is so important today is because there's just so many more things going on. It seems like every single week the world has more wrinkles and more things going on that just is demanding a lot more from us, whether we are just making the conscious effort to say, I'm not going to go do that, or we have to lean in and try to do research and figure out what's really going on. What do we need to care about? How do we need to show up? How do we need to protect our family? How do we need to go provide? So, that all being said, there's more demands being put on us than we have in the past. And so most men actually take their health for granted. Because most men, if I go through and look at all the men that I've been able to help over the years, they start by saying they need money. So guys in their teenage years and in their early 20s are like, I gotta have money, gotta have money, gotta have money. So they work in their 20s, they work really hard, they get into their 30s, maybe they start to feel a little bit better. By the time they get to 40s, they're like, all right, sweet, I've got money, but now I don't have any time. So then they basically have traded their time for their money. And so then they work in their 40s and then their 50s. And then if possible, if they can actually retire, if that's in the cards, then ultimately they, get their time back through retirement. But then ultimately what they realize is that they have sacrificed their health all along the way. Because then they have to go back while they're in their 60s and 70s, as they have muscle decline, as they have other health issues. Maybe they had a heart attack, maybe they had a stroke, maybe they had a cancer scare, maybe the doctor was just like, whoa, your numbers are just way out of balance. Like, you are not giving the time and attention to your health. And so you have traded your health for everything else. So it's not a secret. Most men take their health for granted. They just say, well, I'll just deal with it whenever I can. And that snooze button basically says you're going to prioritize all the 1,000 problems of what you've got until all of a sudden that one problem hits you, which is your health. Okay? And that's kind of what I want to get into. I got some personal stories, some personal experience. I want to share kind of what happened last week, okay? You only notice it when it's really gone. That's the other thing that I've noticed is that health is one of those things that we always are glad that it's there until it's not. And we also, if you go back maybe a month ago on episodes, we never really have the appreciation for the things as they start to wear and tear and get worse, right? So I did some truck maintenance and showed the wheel hub difference between a brand new one and one that had been worn out, and wouldn't have really guessed that one wore out was actually desperate need of attention. So we don't really notice it until it's gone. But what does all that mean? That means that your health is the linchpin. It is the thing, the one problem that if you solve that, then you get the opportunity to have all the other problems, which is how much money can I make? How much, can I put a roof over my head? Can I go take care of my family? Can I be a better husband? Can I be everything? That one big domino is your health, because it is your ability to be able to lead. It's your ability to be able to provide, and it's your ability to be able to execute depending on all of your, all those things depend on your energy. So if you don't have energy, if you don't have health, if you don't have that vibrancy of life, then you're going to be just always pushing harder and harder and harder. And it's just that equation just doesn't balance, okay? So last week I had some a wake-up call. So full transparency, got a different role within the aerospace industry. And so it's just been drinking from a fire hose. Brand new team, brand new organization, brand new set of problems, just tons of stuff. And I haven't really let go of the old role either. So now I'm juggling both roles. So having both roles, trying to do everything, having me in a class, having the homestead, having, being there for Lily as a father, being there for Amber as a husband, just doing all the things, right? Getting stretched really thin. And I had deprioritized sleep. I had deprioritized exercise. I had deprioritized other things. And funny enough, I actually had a buddy that was like, "Hey, how's your workout regimen going?" And I was like, "Man, I kind of, I hear that, but I don't even have time to be able to go do that." And so I was prioritizing all the other problems. So like, this is real time, real feedback. Like, this isn't just preaching up on top of a mountain. Like, this actually is real life happened over the past, right? So I told him that, and it was funny that all of a sudden it caught up with me. And, when I got sick, it was just, I could just notice that all my energy went down. And the simplest of things, like the amount of stuff that I would get done in a day was capped to like 2%, which is really, really hard for a guy like me because I want to be able to get as much stuff done as possible. All the things, right? I try to grab all the things, get them all done, make sure everybody's taken care of. Like, that's just how I'm wired. And so what happened is when I fell sick, it was like everything stopped. Work output went down, the focus went down, my leadership ability went down, my patience went down, the love and what I could give to everybody went down. Energy dropped, it tanked off, and it forced me to slow down into this reality check. And I kind of heard this voice that had said, if you don't take care of problem number one, then you'll never get the opportunity or the gift to have all the other problems. Now, that and by itself we can unpack, because more often than not, everybody always kind of associates, oh man, I'm just so stressed, I got so many problems. It's actually a gift to have those problems, because you get to figure out something. You get to understand it. Now, I get that, right? It could be probably very triggering for somebody that says, you don't understand, I'm working nonstop, trying to support my family, trying to do all this stuff. Brother, I'm here, I hear you, and I understand. But those are all gifts, because imagine having to do that if you weren't able to go work. Imagine trying to live and do all the things that you want to be able to go do without having the same amount of energy, without having the same amount of strength. And I've been able to see so many different guys across, guys and girls, but so many different guys across the ages where somebody was a high functioning, high up executive, and all of a sudden a stroke happened. And then it was just his whole career, the thing that he was just able to go give the world, dropped. And he couldn't go be that high functioning executive anymore. He couldn't go travel around the world. He couldn't go and, create his livelihood the way that he had. And so it required a very different version of him to come up. And it required a lot of different versions of other people around him to be able to make it go work. And so those problems that you've got, whether it's the annoying coworkers, whether it's the, trying to balance budgets, whether it's trying to make sure that your family's taken care of, whether it's trying to make sure that your time is distributed across the things that are the most important to you, those are all gifts. And you never really get to understand that until you are either in a situation or you are experiencing somebody who is in that situation. Like, there's a guy at work a guy at church that he was in a 4-wheeler accident, and the whole church kind of rallied behind and prayed and got through it. The woman stepped right up and did like a meal train, took care of him, which was fantastic. Just amazing work, amazing love in the world, if you get to experience it and get exposed to it. But the thing that we kind of found out later was, I think it was like the assistant pastor had said, thank goodness that her income is enough to kind of support the family, because he's a solopreneur. He's out there doing construction work. So his strength, his ability, his everything was all in. Like, that's how he made money. So the fact that he's going to be on recovery for 6 weeks plus is going to be, he's not going to be able to go do new jobs. He's not going to be able to go do all the things that he needs to be able to go do. So again, like, this is as extreme as having an accident where you're in surgery and you're having to piece together and mend together parts of your body that just frankly were not there, or whether it's a stroke, or whether it is actual just a sickness that takes your energy down, that you may physically still be fine, but the amount of energy and the tenacity at which you get to give life to is taken. Okay? So very, very important. I hope that's a wake-up call. I hope some of these experiences that I've shared causes you to look at that differently, because I think so many guys are just in this, I'll deal with it later, I'll deal with it later, and seeing that that was exactly my reality last week. That's true. That's true for all of us. Like, I'm guilty in that. I'm partially, this is speaking to myself that says, like, this is something that is important, but if you get it right, you get to maintain all the higher level blessings that you are able to take on, all the problems that you're trying to go face, okay? And so, it caused me to really realize, and the reason why I wanted to do a podcast episode on this is because I see that all the craziness happening in the world, cost of everything going up, it's just harder and harder, and all that tends to fall on the shoulders of men. And so those men are carrying more and more responsibilities. They're trying to be the family man. They're trying to be the career-driven person. They're trying to exhibit and teach that level of leadership so that their life and their legacy and their families are all taken care of. That's kind of one of the big things that it is to be a man, is that you start caring about others more than you care about yourself, okay? So that there means that you have to be able to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can then go out and help everybody else, okay? And that also means that if you don't put that on and it starts to take a toll on you, then if you go down, then everything else around you feels that. They might still be able to keep going. They might be able to piecemeal it, together long enough. But what you do and how you show up truly does impact those that are around you, no matter how much you may want to think that it does or it doesn't, okay? And so part of that, or like one of the big pieces of that, is ignoring your health. Is my cholesterol okay? Is my weight okay? Am I actually gaining weight? I was talking to a buddy tonight, actually. I was driving in the truck, and I'm always trying to call people and try to check in on them and make sure that everyone is doing okay. And he was laughing because him and his wife had gone through this really incredible health transformation, losing weight. They're in their 60s, and so it's like they're losing weight. They're just doing really well. They're getting more energy. They're just showing up. They're really doing well in life, okay? And he's like, I went back to look at pictures, and I didn't think I was that out of shape, or I didn't think I had that much weight. But now I look back and I go, whoa, like there was a difference there. Like at the time I couldn't understand it or appreciate it, but now seeing where I am and see how much muscle mass that I've been able to put on and my body fat composition, like looking at where I am now versus back then, it's like really that night and day difference. It goes back to that wheel hub analogy. And so the things that we either tolerate or the things that we're just hitting on snooze, that is just risk that is constantly compounding. And if you do nothing, risk at a certain point, all it takes is one wrong thing, and then you're in a completely different situation waking up the next day. And so this kind of reminded me when we had Daisy. We had a Shih Tzu. And because Amber had like a billion dogs when we got together. And one of the dogs was a Shih Tzu. And she seemed fine and healthy. She was the young pup in that era of all the dogs that we had. And all of a sudden, she just went down like super fast. And we couldn't figure out what was going on with her. We took her to the vet, and we're like what's going on? Like how did all of a sudden she was fine this morning? She was eating breakfast, she was running around, she was playing, everything was fine, and now all of a sudden she is not. She is completely out of breath. You can tell her body is degrading at a super fast rate. Like, what is going on? And I remember that the vet at the time had said, the dog's body is actually really incredible. And dogs have a hard time too, because it's not like they can say, hey, I feel low energy. Hey, I'm not feeling as good as I used to. Or, hey, this hurts. We kind of have to really listen to our animals because they can't communicate in that way. They might be a little bit more on edge. They might be a little bit more lethargic. They might be a little bit more lazy. And we interpret that as like, oh, like must be nice. Or like, man, a dog's just sleeping all day. And there's a piece of that like that's good. That means that they feel safe. But if there's a change in any of that, then that can mean something, right? But when I was talking to the vet, I was like, I don't understand. Like where is all this coming from, and what is really root cause? And they said the human or the dog's body is a lot like the humans. meaning it will rob from itself to balance the equation of all of the processes that has to go on. So like your body maintains a certain level of pH, your stomach maintains a certain level of pH, your body maintains a certain level of temperature. It's doing things, it's dividing cells, it's cleaning things up, it's constantly combating sicknesses, right? Your immune system is always fighting. All your senses are trying to digest and understand all of the environmental stimulus that's happening all around you. So there's a lot of processes that are happening, and it takes, a series of equations. In order to make a cell, it might need, magnesium, and it might need some different vitamins and minerals and nutrients in order to go do that. Well, if you don't have all those nutrients that you're getting in your daily diet, then what your body does is it says, well, I'm going to have to make it work. So I'm going to go make this, but where can I go get, let's say it's magnesium? Well, it goes and starts to target the joints, and it'll slowly start to pull magnesium out of the joints until all of a sudden you have an issue with one of your joints. Either you get an early sign, which is pain, inflammation, that we often kind of pass that off as like, oh, it's just arthritis and it's okay. But if it pulls that last thing, it's just like when you play a game of Jenga. And it's all fun and games until that last piece comes out and the whole thing comes crashing down. And they said that's exactly what's happening with your dog, is that it had been going through and trying to keep itself together for so long that then all of a sudden it just crashes. And the body starts to fall apart in a very fast-paced way. And it was a big learning. It was a big shock for our family, because she went from being completely fine to passing away within like a weekend, I think. Like, it was very abrupt. It was just out of the blue, and it happened. And Amber, Lily was kind of young at the time, so she didn't quite process it. So it was like Amber and I that are just trying to understand, like, what the heck just happened, and how could this happen, and what can we do to make sure that the other dogs aren't impacted, that we're not letting them get to that point. And then also learning that about ourselves, that said, hey, like, we have to show up better. We can't just keep waiting and thinking that we're doing all the right stuff, and then come to find out that last Jenga piece comes out, your whole body collapses, and now you're in that, you've got one problem to solve and not the luxury of all the other things going on in life, okay? And so that's that whole, like, your body compensates until it can't. And just like that system, it can run on reserves until it hits failure. And once it hits zero, it breaks down, right? And that breakdown turns into burnout. It can turn out into illness. It can turn out into heart issues. It can turn into a whole bunch of different stuff, okay? And so this is a lesson that I'd say has been building multiple levels. So we had the Daisy incident that happened a handful of years ago. It was like maybe 5-ish some odd years ago. And that really kind of woke us up to the fact that we have to have better systems, and we have to, like, think about all this stuff consciously. So being an engineer, I just did complete deep dives into all these different topics. And what I came to find out and have implemented was nutrition and vitamins. So I took it all the way to the extreme and figured out what are all the things that we need, what are all the vitamins that plays well together, what are all the vitamins that uses the same receptors, meaning if your body has, let's just say, 5 receptors, and you put in a whole bunch of vitamin C and you put in a whole bunch of vitamin D, they will fight for the same receptors. So instead of getting a huge uptick in one or the other, they will fight and sometimes negate out, okay? So you're not getting the full bioavailability. So I went through all of this, and I found out, right, okay, a lot of pills, depending on the manufacturer, are using bad ingredients. A lot of them have bad fillers. So just went through all of this different things. So to the point where now we actually just make a lot of our own vitamins. But now I know exactly how many milligrams and micrograms of every last little thing to be able to give our bodies all the right building blocks so that it can do all the amazing processes that it needs to do in a day. Went through the path of hot therapy and cold therapy, went through on the consistent exercising, went through, not on the hacks, but building it on discipline. But yet I still, right, it's not like that was the perfect system. But every single time that I have a mishap, a misstep or something else happens, I learn where is another guardrail that I need to put in place that allows me to operate to the maximum capacity, okay? It's almost like if you were trying to scope out an area and you were blindfolded. You don't really know where the limits are. So you kind of have to walk around, and as soon as you feel your foot slip, you go, okay, that's an area where I need to go put something. Okay? That's an area where I need to go put up a guardrail or something that'll hit my foot so I know not to go over there. And so it's years on years figuring out, well, how do I go figure out sleep? How do I go figure out nutrition, like macro level nutrition? How do I go figure out strength? How do I go figure out alignment within the skeletal system? All of these different things plays a block that says, how can I maximize my output? And the way I look at maximizing my output is purely the more that I get to go do, the more that I can help people. And the more that I get to help people, the better I feel, but then also the more inspiration that allows them to go show up and help themselves, right? And that's how we make a change across the whole globe. It always starts small, but then it can grow into bigger and better things. So for me, I'm just always jazzed about this stuff because probably secretly I'm afraid of dying, which is fine, right? You just have to know where your weaknesses are. But the one thing I'll say that I wanted to make sure that we talked about was like the first step. So when I talk to a lot of folks just in day out life, and they, hear me talking about a cold plunge or hot tub or sauna or red light therapy or like any of the other stuff, vitamins and nutrients and eating and water and hydration and all that stuff. And they're like, my God, it's so overwhelming. Where would you start? Like, where's the first step? And I recognize that it is heavy, but it's not. It's heavy when it's digested all at once. But if you sprinkle this out, like this is probably year 6 or more in a journey of trying to develop all of the right routines and disciplines in my life to be able to continuously show up and optimize, right, my day. So I'm here to say if it feels overwhelming, it's because it is. Because when you have somebody that has a lot of experience and you try to distill it down, it can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm living my whole life wrong. And it's not that you're living your whole life wrong. It's just there are things in there that you could do to improve yourself to make sure that you're more resilient to getting sick, more resilient to falling to something. Like there's always going to be those freak accidents that you may not be able to ever prepare for. But you can certainly look ahead and do some things forward looking that can say, hey, I know that I'm not going to be surprised by this, this, and this, right? The major pieces of it. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He was talking about like the 4 deadly horsemen. And those are the things that are like normally come and basically will be our death. And I can't remember it's like, I think it's Peter Attia is the one that wrote this. And he talks really big about lifespan and health span, which is like a really cool topic. Side tangent, sorry. But like those 4 horsemen that he was talking about, those, and I can't remember them offhand, so you'll have to Google that one. But like those things, those are things that you know about, like heart disease, diabetes, cancers. Like there's a lot of things out there that we're now becoming aware of, things that are putting ourselves into a state that is more susceptible, more risk to experiencing one of those things. And then there's things that you can obviously do if you know what things to do that are putting you more at risk, then you know the things that you need to not do so that you're less at risk, right? Makes sense. And so if I boil all this stuff down and I say, what's that one thing? Sleep. Okay? When you get sleep enough, so there's like the quantity of sleep, which is like how many hours is it that you're asleep? Then there's the quality of sleep, which is how rested. So there's different levels of sleep that you can certainly get into. But if for the sake of this conversation, how long are you sleeping? What's the quality of sleeping? And then part of that quality is how many interruptions, right? How many times are you waking up in the middle of the night? And so, call it 2 major things, right? The duration of sleep and the quality of sleep. But if you really focus on those 2 things, what you'll do is that's a big domino that will allow you to be able to go the rest of your life. And so I don't want to say stumbled on this because it's not like it's really groundbreaking, but I really understood the sensitivity that it had in my life when I was getting to the point I was working really hard, doing a lot of things, probably overextending myself, and I was just drinking more and more caffeine. And got to the point where I could drink like a whole pot of coffee. I think it was like back in college. I could drink a whole pot of coffee and still fall asleep in 10 seconds. Like it's just, it didn't really have an effect on me anymore. And at that point, I was trying to out caffeinate my energy. So I was like, well, I'm just going to sleep less, but then I'm going to just drink more caffeine and then I'll be able to get it, get through the day and get all the things done. Really cool, except that didn't work. So what I realized was that the caffeine, when you really start to look at caffeine doesn't actually give you energy, because I thought it did, which is why I was like, well, I just need to keep drinking caffeine and then I'll just have more bouts of energy. And that really wasn't the case. It was just a slow decreasing death. And what I came to realize is that it doesn't give you energy. What it does do is it blocks the receptors in your brain that tells you that you're tired. So if you think every day you wake up with some amount of energy, so let's just say that it's a D battery, or like let's just say that it's a 12-volt battery, or like a car battery, right? You got a car battery, and that's the amount of energy. That's all the energy that you have that you get to spend throughout your day. And what you do is you take that energy and you say, okay, I have however many amp hours, which is just how much capacity you have. Where am I going to spend it? Am I going to spend it in driving around all the place? Am I going to spend it on social media? Am I going to spend it on whatever else? Like that's just your capacity, right? All the things that you get to do in a day like comes from that battery. Well, if you start to degrade on sleep, right? And so instead of getting, let's just say 7 hours is where your sweet spot is. And it varies. So that's why this is a very person dependent. This isn't, anybody that says 8 hours is like the standard. It probably was whenever we noticed, at some point in our life, we just said, okay, 8 hours is like the standard. Well, then as we found out, some people, again, duration and quality have a handle. Meaning, if you slept 6 hours, but you got really good quality of sleep, probably would compensate for 10 hours of okay, mediocre sleep. So it's really both of those things that builds up your capacity, okay? So if you are constantly just sacrificing your sleep in order to get more done and you're trying to do the caffeine game, all that's doing is it's taking that big battery, and let's just say that you start whittling it down, and all of a sudden you just whittle it down even more and more and more. And it turns out instead of a big car battery, you now have a handful of D batteries. And then the more that you start sacrificing sleep, you throw out a couple more Ds, or maybe you convert those Ds into C batteries, and then double A's, and then triple A's, and then maybe all you're riding with is a couple button batteries. That might be all the energy that you feel like you've got in a day. But the way that you fill up and you get back to that capacity is through getting really good quality sleep. And when you fix that quality of sleep, like what I had found out in this real life study was I could wean myself off of caffeine, and I actually woke up more energetic. I would get to the point, instead of waking up just exhausted and having to just pry my eyes open and then really try to start getting through the day, I would wake up and I go, wow, like I'm actually ready to hit the day. Like it was, whatever it was, like 5 a.m. I'm like, man, I'm like ready to hit the day. I got the energy. I'm ready to go. And I might not have that cup of coffee until about 9 o'clock. But I just, I may want that because there's the addiction, not necessarily, like there's two addictions for me. One of them is, caffeine, that's great, but I really love the taste of just nice, good quality black coffee. So there's that piece of it. But what I've noticed is if I can push that out longer and just naturally let my circadian rhythm come alive and that whole waking up process, I feel more sustained amounts of energy throughout the day. And that basically, kind of squashed for me the caffeine game that I was playing, which was, well, if I just drink a whole lot more coffee, then I'll be able to get through. Or like, coffee's starting to feel stale, so I just need to give myself an energy drink, which is just a lot of sugar and a lot of caffeine. Again, both things that are starting to just dwindle, works really well for that day, which is why we go back to it. Because imagine, your receptors got blocked, 20%. Well, from feeling 100% tired to 80% feeling tired, you're going to feel pretty good. But then when you hit that energy drink and all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe that's 50%. So you feel like you're alive. So you think, well, if this is good, then more of it is better. And that's not always the case. And it also just starts to turn into an equation that just can't balance. So if I would tell anybody where to focus on, it would be sleep. And it would be, even like the littlest of things, which is like there's biohackers out there on the internet that have optimized everything. Like Brian Johnson, he was like an ex PayPal guy, I think, and he has taken the engineer's approach to everything biohacking. And so there were things that he noticed, and you can go look them up and find all this information. But it was like if you stop eating by 7 o'clock, then all of a sudden it gives your body, and I think he does it even earlier. Like I think he swings it way to the extreme, so he stops eating I think at noon or something like that. But in general, if you just have an early dinner and then you just don't eat and you resist those munchies, you'll actually feel more rested when you wake up the next day because your body is. Because if you eat all those late night munchies where you're like, man, I'm hungry, but I not like a big meal. I just need some chips or some candy or something. When you do that, you're actually keeping your digestive system awake and alive. So when you go to fall asleep, your body is still working on double duty because it's still trying to digest everything. So you're not getting the most restful sleep. And then, so again, that quality, you sacrifice the quality. So you may be sleeping a lot longer, right? You may be like, well, I'm going to bed at 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever it is. You may be getting the duration, but you might not be getting the quality as much. So like he noticed, right, make sure that you're hydrated, don't drink water. Don't drink a lot of water before bed because then you have to get up to pee. Again, it hits the quality. So it's just like some of these things that when you start to dial that in correctly, you'll start to see the big dividends on the other side of it, which is having more sustained energy. When we have more sustained energy, you allow your body to heal itself to all the things that it needs to do. You're less likely to get sick. And so you're less likely to get sick, then you get to be able to show up and have all the problems that you've got in the day. And yeah, it does in some ways, cause some sacrifice. Instead of maybe staying up late and doing all the fun things that you wanted to go do, it's where some of the discipline comes in. But little bits where you're starting to build for your future self, you'll get to that point where you get enough of that momentum that then it allows you to start having more freedom in life. Like the people who have made the most money, call it millionaires and billionaires, when you talk to them, the things that they have done is that they've got, they will always say discipline has actually given them freedom. Whereas people who view discipline and like having to go do the routines and to do all that other stuff is like, that's not freedom. It's that they haven't done it long enough to see the value of that. Like when you wake up and you go, my morning routine is that I have to go and actually just get some exercising done. Doesn't matter what it is, but I just have to get some exercise done. Then you'll come to find out, well, wait a second. Now that thing that I was always delaying later and later in the day and would not always get done and would then feel bad about myself is done at the very beginning of my day. Now that gives me, instead of all that heaviness after work and after, a couple hours we had with family time, now all of a sudden it's like, exercise is done. Like I already paid that tax. That tax was done as soon as I woke up. Now I get to spend a lot more time with the family, with the, sons and daughters and wives and all of that type of stuff that you wanted to be able to go do. Like you get to do that without having the guilt or the shame by not going and working out and taking care of yourself and et cetera, et cetera. So, that's the thing that I would say to focus on. If there's one thing from this episode is two things. One is to just recognize the blessings that you have. All the problems that you get to experience are truly blessings. And that when you fall sick or when you have a health issue, you only have one problem to deal with. And the second one is to focus on sleep, to figure out how do you carve out and really start to track. And another easy thing is whatever you can track gets whatever you can measure gets tracked. And whatever is measured that can get tracked, you can then start to understand trends. And so in that, you might find if you stop eating the munchies at 9 o'clock and then you start pulling that back to 8 o'clock and then maybe to 7 o'clock and you start working your way back, you'll start to notice, well, how, if you tracked your sleep or, when you wake up, how well you feel rested. and you start to notice those positive trends, and you say, well, now I know that that feeling better is actually linked to what I just did over here. And when those two now link, it makes a lot more sense why you need to go do those things so that you can wake up and have a much more sustained way. And you start to see all these different pieces start to come together. And when you see all the pieces start to come together, you really start to get to live a much different life than you've ever been able to get to previously, which is a really, really cool spot. And I really hope that you guys get to see and experience it, because it truly is a blessing. Okay, so if I were to say call to action, stop treating your health like a side project, because it's not. It's your only project. You're just delaying the impact of what that can have in your life. It truly is the foundation, and if you're serious about leveling up, you got to start building some standards and some accountability. Now, I can talk about this stuff all day. I can tell you all the experiences. I can tell you where I've tripped up and where I've had good successes. I just had this thought pop to me, but if it's something that you are willing to say, yep, okay, this is something I want to go do, but I would like the accountability. I would like to learn specifically in a digested form that says, how do you go take, life of where you're at today, and you start adding in something like each week, and how do you start to build the necessary discipline and the systems to be able to continue to keep evolving and growing, and the accountability to make sure that you're holding through to it. Reach out to me, because it wouldn't be an awful idea to get a group of 5 to 10 guys together that says, okay, this is going to be our common goal. Everyone is going to want to feel better in 6 weeks, and maybe, whatever the right time scale is. But let's just get a group of guys together, and I'll share all the things of what I know. I'll pull in experts from, health and fitness, from biohacking, from all the different things that I've been able to learn. We'll bring this all together and then help to work on an action plan that says, okay, here's what you're going to go do, and you'll do it alongside other guys. And when you do it alongside other guys, then you start to feel that accountability, like, well, everybody else is getting up and doing this, so I'm going to go do it too. So if that's interesting to you, if that's something that you would like help with, reach out, because if I get enough interest, I might just go ahead and build like a 5 to 10 guy group that says, this is what we're going to go do. Getting into, end of March, getting into April, May, June, we're just going to go tackle this thing so that by the time summer really hits, right, Memorial Day really hits, that everyone is operating at their peak and that they can finish out the 2026 the best way that they know how, okay? So if that's something that interests you, reach out. Hopefully this episode was good, gave you some helpful insights. If it did, leave a review on the podcast. I always love reading and seeing what guys might be learning or appreciate. It also helps to me to figure out what are the things that we want to do more on, double down more on. And with that, keep moving forward, and happy Tuesday. Take care.